I wanted to do a video about Luciferian versus Satanic, or Lucifer versus Satan, however you want to describe it. But I also wanted to show where these two things actually come from and why it is that we seem to be misunderstanding them currently. First, we have to back up and cover some pre-Christian ideas and even some things that come before Judaism to see how they evolved and where basically how they were stolen and assimilated into new traditions over time. So if we back up to the Tree of Life from the Kabbalah, it consists of 3 pillars: the left pillar, the right pillar, and the middle pillar. The left and right pillars don't go all the way up or all the way down. The middle pillar is the only pillar that does this. The left and right pillars are also known as the pillars of severity and mercy, respectively. But for the sake of simplicity, we're just going to refer to them as the left or the right pillar. The middle pillar represents the middle way, the non-polarized position that can exist between the two extremes of the left and right pillars. In classical, esoteric teachings that are rarely taught anymore in modern times, these 3 pillars represent the 3 beings one encounters. The middle pillar represents the Christic beings, such as Christ, the archangels, and ultimately people that are on the path of trying to develop themselves spiritually. Since the middle pillar goes all the way up and down, it is the pillar that ascends all the way to the source, which some refer to as God or heaven, also goes all the way down to matter and the state of creation, basically the earth we find ourselves on currently. Now the left pillar, sometimes called the left-hand path, is representative of beings of light, beings that want to ascend. They don't identify with the physical world, and they see the physical world as suffering. These beings were understood to be of great spiritual light. In Egyptian tradition, this pillar is represented by Horus. Now, just because it's considered the path of light doesn't mean one should throw all their eggs in one basket with that path. If you do, you will find yourself very aloof, not able to identify very much with the world. You might cease to take care of everyday things needed for survival. You might even sacrifice personal relationships. Now the right-hand path, or the right pillar, consists of beings that are solely concerned with the material. The Gnostics refer to this being as the demiurge, which is considered to be Lord of the Earth. It's the one that created the world and the material physicality as we know it. These are darker beings, with no want to rise or ascend into the light. To follow this side is to be concerned completely with the material and not have any concern for the spiritual. For the Egyptian tradition, this pillar was represented by Set. It's important to remember that this video isn't about a lecture on good and evil. I'm not saying that you should follow one or the other. This is just the polarity. It's just the 2 sides of the same coin. Now this is where it gets a little interesting. The left pillar beings, the beings of light, they are the light bringers, or if you prefer it in Latin, lux fer. Lux fer, later linguistically, became Lucifer. Lux fer, Lucifer. Traditionally, the Luciferian path wasn't seen as evil or bad at all, until the church, of course, got a hold of it, but we'll come back to that point towards the end of this video. Now the right-hand path that we mentioned was represented by Set, if we were talking about the Egyptian tradition. When Moses came out of Egypt, he knew a lot about Egyptian culture and the mystery schools in Egypt. In Hebrew, Set became Ha-Satan, which means adversary. This later was shortened to just Satan. This character was absorbed by later traditions such as Christianity to become the adversary of God. So to sum up, Lucifer, or Luciferian beings, are beings that bring light. They don't like the material world, and they don't wish to stay here any longer than necessary. They are on one side of this polarity. On the other side of the polarity is Ha-Satan, or Satan, which is concerned with the materialistic and earthly issues, both good and bad, but earthly issues, material issues nonetheless. So where does this idea about Lucifer and Satan being the same person come from? If you remember a minute ago, we said we'd come back to this in the church, right? At some point in the church's rush to denounce matriarchy and promote patriarchy, they made a move to demonize women, as well as other ancient traditions. The planet Venus was considered an extension of the goddess Venus, and was a major deity associated with femininity. Venus was known as the morning star, since it was the brightest star at that point in the sky, just before sunrise. Venus brought the light of the sun to the sky in the morning. This light bringer status was applied to Venus, both planet or star and the goddess. Because of that assigned status, in one fell swoop, Venus was now labeled Lucifer and was made into a fallen or evil being, and as a result was also promoted to the same level as Satan in the Christian religious paradigm. So now for a little bonus. This tree of life idea is actually seen in a lot of paintings depicting the crucifixion, and also in modern church presentations. If you remember, there were 3 crosses on the hill when Christ was crucified. Christ was in the center. He was the middle pillar, the being that existed and appreciated the material, but had the ability to ascend. He was the amalgamation of the dark and material, as well as the light and the spiritual. On one side, you had the criminal that asked to ascend with him to heaven, and on the other side, you had the criminal that refused to be saved and go to heaven, according to the Christian story. It's easy to identify which is which because one of the criminals that represents the left pillar has his head facing towards Christ, and the other one that represents the right-hand path, or the right pillar, is facing away from Christ. Those 2 criminals that were crucified on either side of Christ at the same time are representative of the Luciferian path of ascension, when asking to go with the spiritual being in the middle, as well as the satanic person, or the satanic being on the right, which wishes to stay in the material world. This is De Jedi Gnostica, and thank you for listening.